We need to delve into why Ferrari has problems with the rear of the car, why Vassar stated that there will be other teams that will incur disqualification this year, but above all we need to analyze the lack of rotation of the Ferrari SF25 and finally see the differences between Mercedes and McLaren. Before we start, if you like the videos on the channel, please leave a supportive like, and if you are not yet subscribed, subscribe and activate notifications. But now let's look at all the news in detail. The only bright spot for 2025 so far has come in the Shanghai sprint race with the pole and victory of Lewis Hamilton, but that isolated exploit is not enough to save a start to the season well below expectations for Ferrari. The ambitious and revolutionary SF25 has so far proven to be a complicated and contradictory project. The single-seater, which on paper was supposed to represent a clear leap in quality, is showing a technical fragility that forces engineers to find the right balance between performance and reliability, especially in the management of the rear end. And it is this element that we will analyze in detail today. The bottom in particular imposes compromises on the setups to protect the mechanical integrity, limiting the potential of the car. McLaren, while using in a similar way, has made more effective choices, has revolutionized the MCL39 compared to the 2024 model, and at least in the first two races the results are proving them right. In Ferrari, the level of change has been comparable. Over 99% of the car has been revised. But at the moment it seems like a misstep, so it was a revolution in the wrong places. The SF25's limitations may be unsolvable in the near future. Today's cars are some of the most complex ever, with many aspects remaining unclear. As even a paddock technician admitted, there are dynamics that are still too approximate to understand in full, and despite it being the last year of the current regulatory cycle, these single-seaters remain an enigma. Red Bull had dominated this cycle, reaching the peak in 2023, only to collapse in just 8 months. Mercedes, 8 times champion between two regulations, has never been able to find the balance to return to the top. And Ferrari, for its part, has often chased more than led, and 2025 risks being yet another chapter in this pursuit. But we must break a lance in favor of Ferrari, because the SF25 still represents the most daring project of these last 4 years. A deep evolution of the SF24 that at the end of last year had given encouraging signs, but the audacity is backfiring. The aerodynamic department led by Diego Tondi has increased the load of the car, but these cannot be exploited properly due to the limits of the mechanical platform. The modifications to the suspension gearbox group, designed to improve the setup window and the efficiency of the diffuser, have instead generated an unstable rear end that is difficult to manage. The OXR is working to find buffer solutions, moving within the margins allowed by the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile regulations, which allow modifications only in case of reliability issues.
As far as
concerns engines. And with 2026 on the horizon, every intervention must be carefully evaluated, especially in terms of budget. In short, McLaren currently leads, but has Ferrari delayed their response? If on one hand Ferrari fights with its own limits, on the other hand McLaren enjoys the fruits of brave and well-considered choices. The MCL39 represents a decisive step compared to 2024, and according to some rivals, the Woking technicians are still discovering all the potential of the new car, especially in qualifying. At Maranello, a similar, more extreme setup was considered in the front, taking inspiration directly from McLaren. The switch to the front pull rod, decided last May, was just the first step. But while McLaren pushed further, redesigning the kinematics and moving the mechanics for aerodynamic purposes, accepting a weight increase close to 6.61 pounds, Ferrari decided not to follow this path to the end. The extreme anti-dive solution, for example, was evaluated but then discarded because of more disadvantages than benefits. The front suspension of the McLaren with a very lowered upper triangle remains a mystery object for many opponents. And it's not just Ferrari wondering. Mercedes also discarded the lowered rear arm of 2024, preferring to keep the strut and adopt a solution similar to McLaren for the steering column set back in the frame. While in Brackley and Woking the fruits are reaped, or solid foundations are laid for the future, in Maranello there remains the feeling of an ambitious project, perhaps too much so, that currently can't keep up. The SF25 is a technical gamble that needs time, corrections, and perhaps even a bit of luck. However, after only 2 races, it's too early to dismiss the SF25 project. You have to give it some time to develop and best adapt the balance depending on the tracks. That will come, but above all, you have to think that Ferrari finds itself in the position of McLaren of a year ago, so it takes more time to grow. McLaren is now reaping the fruits of its own work. Ferrari instead will reap them later. I know it seems like the usual phrase we will win next year, but in my opinion today the Ferrari project is good and is on the right track. So I remain positive from this point of view, and Vassar has leaned on the arrival of new disqualifications for the next races. He declared more disqualifications are coming as the fight is tight and requires pushing to the limit. The Prisma team from the stable intervened to analyze with a cool head what happened during the Shanghai weekend, also offering an overview of the current state of the SF25 project.
Between highs and
lows, our job is to learn. This is what was stated. In an interview with the team, Vasseur wanted to emphasize the importance of evaluating each
weekend.
My job is to analyze what works and what doesn't. In every race, there are positives and negatives. In China, we experienced both extremes. It's a shame, however, that the end of Sunday overshadowed the encouraging signs shown up to that point. What often lingers in memory is the most recent outcome. And it's frustrating because compared to Australia, we've taken a step forward, even if it hasn't translated into points. Lewis's pole and sprint victory, along with Charles's good race, are concrete signs that we are improving. Hamilton brings the first victory of 2025. In fact, Lewis Hamilton's success in the sprint marked a historic moment, his first victory in red. And it also dispelled some doubts about the competitiveness of the 7-time world champion in his first season at Ferrari, and now over 40 years old. Vasseur said it's crude and false to think that it's over. Just look at the last race of 2024, he started 16th and finished 4th ahead of his teammate. His arrival brought excitement and motivation and gave Charles even more room to focus on work with the engineers. A positive dynamic for both. Even the media hype that accompanied Hamilton's signing, according to Vasseur, was not fueled by the team. We didn't do interviews or events in Maranello. The enthusiasm is there, but we weren't the ones looking for it. It's part of the game. You must learn to live with it. And if Saturday smiled at the Russians, Sunday was a defeat, double disqualification, 2 different reasons, and the same disappointment. But behind the Monegasque's penalty, there was a set of small details, as Vasseur tells. It wasn't just the strategy's fault for a stop. Charles's water bottle was leaking, and we lost a liter of water. It's always a sum of many factors. For Hamilton, however, it was a calculated risk that exceeded what was permitted. Vasseur said, "We were probably too aggressive, but it's proof that we're striving for perfection and sometimes we overdo it." Pierre Gasly was also disqualified, which Vasseur sees as the first of many such incidents to come. In fact, the team principal said yes, it will happen again, referring to the disqualifications. In Formula 1, the game is to push to the extreme, to the last gram of weight, but also to the last 1/10 of a millimeter of the skid and to the last deformation of the wings. The tighter the competition gets, the more you run to the limit and the more you risk going over. And over the course of the Chinese weekend, the management of the team radios by the Formula 1 management direction also caused a stir, accused of having constructed a misleading narrative about a supposed team order between Hamilton and Leclerc. But Vasseur puts an end to the matter clearly. "I didn't talk to them, I just told the press what I thought, and that's it." Luis proposed to let Charles pass. It wasn't an attractive story, but it was true. It was a gesture of great sportsmanship and professionalism. It's not often that a 7-time world champion says, "Let my teammate pass, he's faster than me." While on the Lawson-Tsunoda case, Vasseur said he does not judge. The team principal refrained from publicly commenting on Red Bull's controversial decision to swap Yuki Tsunoda and Liam Lawson's seats after only 2 GPs. There are billions of reasons behind decisions like this, and sometimes even the driver doesn't know them. We don't have enough elements to judge, and I don't want to do it. I hate when our choices are judged, so I won't do it with others. That's how Vasseur weighed in on the race in China, and I also think we will see more disqualifications this year because all the teams will push to the limit, both with the wear of the skate but also with the fuel load. This Chinese Grand Prix is a valuable lesson for Ferrari. But was Leclerc's disqualification really caused by the water bag in the single-seater? Vasseur, who revisited the topic, said that one of the causes was the liter of water lost from Charles's hydration bag. But the justification did not convince at all those who know well the dynamics of Formula 1. Firstly, because the drinking system of the single-seater is extremely simple, calibrated to the gram and managed with the utmost care. The teams carefully choose the amount of liquid to load. Usually, they opt for a 1.057 quarts bottle filled with simple water, nothing more. Over time, attempts to integrate mineral salts were made but abandoned due to high temperatures and the risk of tube incrustations, similar to cholesterol in arteries. Moreover, with lateral and longitudinal accelerations reaching up to 5 or 0.21 ounces, the pilots tend to drink the bare minimum to avoid physical discomfort, such as intestinal water blockage. Today in Formula 1, the aim is to finish the race with an empty bag, not with unnecessary reserves of liquid. Carrying an extra liter of water on board would be a strategic mistake that goes against all performance logic. In a world where every gram can make a difference, such a choice would simply be unacceptable. And if it was indeed a leak, the mistake would be even more serious because it would have shown a flaw in the control of a detail as trivial as it is potentially decisive. In short, Vassar tries to defend the team but also reignites some controversy. Perhaps it would have been better to avoid providing such weak explanations just now when the pressure on the team had eased. The main team's statements have reignited the spotlight on a disqualification already digested by many fans, leaving the impression of wanting to justify the unjustifiable. In a championship where every detail counts, Ferrari would do better to focus on the present and avoid explanations that only risk being flawed from all sides. In short, Vassar attributed one of the factors that contributed to the disqualification of the Monegasque driver to Charles Waterbag, with the car underweight also because of this component. The justification doesn't hold up regardless of whether it's due to a malfunction or something else. In fact, there seems to be a more detailed technical explanation about Charles's disqualification. During the usual post-race technical checks, Leclerc's car was found to be below the minimum regulatory weight of 1,762 pounds, excluding the fuel. After the aspiration of the residual fuel and considering a frontal damage that took off about half a kilo, the total weight was 1,760 pounds, just 1 kilo under the limit, but enough to determine the disqualification. It's crucial to remember that a Formula 1 car at the end of the race loses on average 44 pounds of total weight in addition to the consumption of gasoline. This is caused by mechanical wear of gearbox, brakes, oil, fluids, coolants, and especially tires. Each component is pushed to the extreme in about 100 to 86 miles, the equivalent of tens of thousands of kilometers on a road car in terms of stress. The factor that most influenced Leclerc's disqualification was precisely the wear of the tires. The long final stint of over 30 laps significantly wore down the tread of the hard tires, considering that each tire can also lose 2 or 6.61 pounds of worn material. Tire degradation alone can reduce the car's weight by 10-26 pounds, affecting its performance and handling. That's why at the end of the race, the drivers are invited to perform the pickup, that is, to deviate from the ideal trajectories to pick up rubber and marbles from the track, artificially increasing the weight of the single-seater. Leclerc followed the procedure as indicated over the radio. But the very long stint and the wear and tear greater than expected made even this maneuver insufficient. In the preparation phase, the engineers simulate with extreme precision the evolution of the car's weight during the race. Fuel consumption, tire wear, oil, fluids, gear changes, braking, aerodynamic load. The goal, to cross the finish line with a weight of at least 1,765 pounds, providing a safety margin. The maximum estimated error is 2.2 pounds. But something Shanghai slipped away. The SF2516 had been set for a two-stop strategy, then modified on the fly. This lengthened the second stint, leading to unexpected tire degradation. In addition, Leclerc spent many laps in Hamilton's dirty area, putting more stress on the cooling systems and consuming more coolant. A liter less here, 0.35 ounces there. The missing weight is not due to a single factor, but a sum of details. The wear of the tires beyond predictions, the excess coolant, a possible fluid leak from the water bottle, and front damage. There are many factors that have affected, but in Formula 1, even just a kilo makes a difference. Hamilton, on the other hand, was disqualified for excessive wear of the skid under the car, the same reason he was disqualified in Austin in 2023. The incident will certainly serve as a lesson for the Maranello team, who will now have to review the pre-race simulations, but also the sensor system to monitor the evolution of weight during the Grand Prix with greater accuracy. In a situation where every point can be decisive, mistakes like these are no longer allowed. But I want to go and analyze the lack of rotation of the Ferrari with you.
SF25.
What was missing in China, and how can this project evolve? What do Hamilton and Leclerc feel when they drive this single-seater? The problems of the Italian car emerge clearly on various fronts. The main issue is not so much the rear suspension itself, but the interaction between the rear axle, pull rod, and the car floor. To this is also added an aerodynamic floor that generates a peak load that is little exploitable, and so the result is a single-seater that is difficult to balance and interpret, especially in slow sections and high lateral energy curves. Let's start from the first chicane of the Chinese track, a technical combination where the input on gas and brake must be dosed with extreme precision. Here the McLaren shows good lateral grip, while the Ferrari is more restless in transition. Comparing qualifying laps, Piastri takes the cleanest, most internal line at the first apex, attacking the curb better. On the contrary, Hamilton is forced to increase the steering angle to close the trajectory, finding himself poorly positioned for the next turn. This delay in rotation forces the Brit to cover more ground and slows down the entire sequence. Continuing the analysis at turn 6, a tight slow bend, Hamilton keeps struggling. This is clearly noticeable from the width of the steering angle at the center of the curve. The SF25 shows persistent understeer at low speed, a consequence of the overly rearward mechanical balance and hard to correct during setup. The result is that Lewis is forced to delay the application of the accelerator on exit. Even though theoretically the car's traction is good, the problem in insertion compromises any possible advantage, nullifying the positive response of the rear axle. In the following medium-high speed curves, Hamilton follows a tighter line, but the McLaren proves to be faster in changing direction. Piastri manages to take advantage of a stable rear that precisely follows the front. It's a crucial advantage, especially in the fluid sections and in the parts where vertical and lateral loads alternate. In 90-degree turns like 9 and 10, Hamilton still shows clear signs of difficulty. At 9, the front struggles to turn, and on exit, the Brit has to correct for excessive rotation. But it's not pure oversteer, it's the understeer on entry that compromises the balance, triggering chain reactions in the car's dynamics. I recall a similar issue with Alonso's 2014 Ferrari F14T, which was unmanageable. This theme has been observed in Australia and Bahrain tests and confirmed by Leclerc. The car lacks confidence on corner entry, affecting everything else.
Rest at the
Curve 10, the handling of the SF25 becomes even more complicated. The wind, always a sensitive factor for ground effect cars, certainly didn't help. Hamilton briefly lost the rear on entry, a further symptom of the limits of interaction between aerodynamic underbody and suspension mechanics. In short, the picture that emerged from the onboard is clear. The Ferrari SF25 struggles to rotate. The main problem is the lack of rotation on corner entry, which results in understeer and excessive use of the steering by the drivers in the middle of the corner. This creates a cascade of consequences: worse positioning for the following curves, delay in acceleration, and less effectiveness of the traction pickup. The current aerodynamic map does not help and limits the setup possibilities. Ferrari is working on a series of updates scheduled for next month, crucial to give the SF25 some breathing room and bring it back to a condition where it can express all its potential, which is still unexpressed at the moment. Unlike Ferrari's previous single-seaters, however, this SF25 can't rotate because it doesn't operate within the correct working window. In fact, we saw it during the sprint race with less fuel load. The car was rotating. Hamilton was at ease with the setups, so everything functioned flawlessly. During the race with more fuel on board and also during the qualifications with a different setup, the Ferrari struggled to rotate, a symptom that in non-ideal conditions it returns to marked understeer at the front, which then consequently compromises the entire balance. Understeer on entry that turns into oversteer on exit. This is what also happened on the 2014 Ferrari. As mentioned previously, Alonso was there with an unmanageable and undrivable car. One last aspect that I want to analyze with you are the venturi channels of Ferrari and McLaren compared. The MCL39 has a more rounded channel roof compared to the more squared design on the Ferrari SF25. This difference affects the way vortices are generated and managed within the floor, conditioning the airflow towards the diffuser. The two philosophies reflect different choices in the control of flow stability and in the management of aerodynamic load. The McLaren's keel features a more elaborate design, with wide fittings and an additional lip that creates a localized depression useful for generating greater vertical load. Ferrari, meanwhile, sticks to a simpler, more direct approach. This choice ensures reliability and ease of management, but limits the aerodynamic potential. A localized depression, if well managed, can increase the load, but requires an extremely stable platform, something that the Ferrari SF25 currently struggles to handle. The vertical excursions of the bottom and the oscillation of the frame make the management of such a profile more complex. Ferrari deliberately uses a setup with more rear squat, that is, a more pronounced sanking during acceleration. This technical choice, if well utilized, can ensure excellent performance. On the diffuser, however, Ferrari has been more conservative. In fact, it adopts a softer and less aggressive profile with the aim of stabilizing the outgoing flow and reducing the risk of separation in variable dynamic conditions. On the other hand, thanks to McLaren, the more rigid and predictable platform allows for a more aggressive high-performance design. In Formula 1, driving conditions like pitch, roll, and ground clearance vary continuously. Managing these variables is crucial to maintain consistent aerodynamic load, and McLaren has worked to flatten the peak of load on the rear, better redistributing the downforce along the bottom of the car. The result is that the single-seater is perhaps more oversteering but stable, especially in fast corners where it manages to generate vertical thrust more consistently. The lack of downforce of the Ferrari has been visible at various points in the first two GPs, but even more so, the absolute value is the discontinuity of the load that makes the difference. We will see with the next updates to the bottom and diffuser how the Ferrari SF25 will improve. However, one thing is certain. These updates are needed as soon as possible, perhaps already from the Japan or Bahrain Grand Prix. But let's also briefly talk about Mercedes. Will they be able to reach McLaren and Red Bull? The start of the season for Mercedes has been solid and steady. After the first two rounds of the 2025 World Championship in Melbourne and Shanghai, the Brackley team finds itself in second place in the Constructors' Championship, a position that reflects the ability to maximize the potential of the new V16. Even though the gap from McLaren, currently the real benchmark, is still evident. Team principal Toto Wolff expressed satisfaction with the performance of the Russell-Antonelli duo, and in the usual post-Grand Prix debrief, Chauvelin, trackside engineering director, gave an overview of the weekend in China and the upcoming challenges. We worked to put more front end on the car, both mechanically and aerodynamically, and the changes made between Saturday and Sunday were aimed at improving the race pace, even at the expense of qualifying. Yet Russell still achieved a brilliant front row, maximizing the potential of the V16. Antonelli's performance was hampered by damage to his car's floor, caused by hitting a curb on the first lap that Leclerc's Ferrari had taken. He couldn't avoid it as he was surrounded by cars on both sides. The damage certainly compromised the balance, Chauvelin explained, and the estimated loss on Antonelli was 2-3 tenths per lap. The aerodynamic load was unbalanced, and a deficit at the rear overheated the tires and reduced grip. It's not just a pure performance loss. The behavior of the car becomes unstable and inconsistent, with varying effects curve by curve depending on the side wind. Despite the challenges, Antonelli secured 6th place, partly due to Ferrari's disqualification, proving his strong adaptation to Formula 1. He's learning a lot. Stepping in for a champion like Lewis is not easy, but thanks to the support of Bono, he's growing well. The team is excited to work with him. On the upcoming races, Mercedes is leaning this way. Suzuka is an iconic and fast track, but for Kimi it will be a nice challenge in his third race. We tested in Bahrain, while Saudi Arabia has smooth new asphalt. We're working hard on updates. We think the car can close the gap. Max is fast, Ferrari is unlucky, but McLaren is the one to beat. And Chauvelin has concluded. It's exciting to start a championship with a car that works well, that the drivers appreciate, and that offers predictable behavior. And even Toto Wolff has taken a stand and said, Antonelli, I chose him the day Lewis left. And I want to prepare him to become an absolute protagonist in 2026 with the change to the regulation. So this year will serve to prepare the Italian driver for next year. Tell me in the comments what you think about all the topics we covered in the video. Remember to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss any new videos on the channel. Every day, I keep you updated on all the Formula 1 news and specifically on Ferrari-related topics. Check out the related videos. See you in the next one from Rassaduto.